more about where you're headed in the future and how exciting that so far the response has been great. All right, well, our next talk is going to be about the impacts of the national and local chapters of 500 Women Scientists. And we've got 3 speakers that I'd like to welcome. Tanya Dapkey is an entomologist who's currently working as a section lead at the Academy of Natural Sciences in the Macroinvertebrate Lab at the Patrick Center for Environmental Research. She utilizes STEM outreach activities to bring her love of insects to anyone who will listen. Yay, insects. And in 2017, she co-founded the Philly Pod of 500 Women Scientists and was a member of the National Leadership Board from 2017 to 2020, where she helped to organize over 300 global pods. Locally, Saranya Anantapantula is a high school student at Springford Area High School who has nurtured her love of the environment since she was young. From foraging with her grandmother to creating informational videos to winning awards at international environmental competitions. She's always innovating. She's designed an aquatic robot to monitor water quality and leads a water filter project to provide clean drinking water in India. And her podcast, highlighting women in STEM, dovetails nicely with her book, Gateway to Environmental Solutions. And finally, JoEllen McBride is the Associate Director of the Graduate Student Center at the University of Pennsylvania. Her career path has connected science, communication, and mentorship. She studied how galaxies create stars. She's been a AAAS Mass Media Fellow at the Voice of America, and she now manages the Navigating the Academy programs at Penn. She also serves as Advocacy Director of the 500 Women Scientists Philly Pod, a past member of the AAS Committee on the Status of Women in Astronomy, and the chair of the Education Committee at the American Helicopter Museum. So, Tanya, Saranya, and JoEllen, thank you for talking with us today.
Hi there. Just first I want to say how wonderful it is to be here, and it's really an honor to be on stage with all of you. So, thank you. So welcome to our talk about the impacts of national and local chapters of 500 Women Scientists. 500 Women Scientists is a global grassroots organization with a mission to make science open, inclusive, and accessible by fighting racism, patriarchy, and oppressive societal norms. Yay. On the evening of the election of November 2016, 5 friends came together to discuss the results. Some of them are in the picture here. It evolved into lots of ideas, but most notably a document, an open letter to all scientists. The letter went live with 500 signatures, and in less than a week later, it had over 1,200. Before we stopped accepting signatures, we got up to about 13,000. So maybe some of you remember this letter, but in the event that you do not, here are some of my personal favorite parts. We, as women scientists, reaffirm our commitment to build a more inclusive society and scientific enterprise. We reject the hateful rhetoric that was given a voice during the US presidential election and which targeted minority groups, women, LGBTQIA, immigrants, and people with disabilities, and attempted to discredit the role of science in our society. Many of us feel personally threatened by this divisive and destructive rhetoric and have turned to each other for understanding, strength, and a path forward. We are members of racial, ethnic, and religious minority groups. We are immigrants. We are people with disabilities. We are LGBTQIA. We are scientists. We are women. These words resonated with many women and gender minorities across the globe. The organization grew exponentially. We used to say, we're building a plane as we're flying it. And as the years progressed, that pledge became action items and fueled the National Leadership Board and local chapters to engage with society to make changes. So programs focus on 3 goals: changing the face of science, holding institutions accountable, and building collective power. To change the face of science, 500 Women Scientists have developed platforms and programs that elevate marginalized groups in sciences, programs like Gauge, Wikiathons, and Fellowship for the Future. To hold institutions accountable, 500 Women Scientists engages the public and policymakers to bring attention to issues that affect women in science. And to build collective power, local chapters called pods encourage members to engage with their local communities. So let's take a closer look at the impact of some of these programs. Gauge started as Request a Woman in STEM. In January of 2018, a platform whose purpose was to re-educate our culture on what a scientist looks like. That first year, nearly 8,000 women and gender diverse folks signed up to be on the platform. Request has been revamped. It is now called Gauge. Gauge is a global search platform where journalists, media outlets, conference planners, and others seeking brilliant voices in science can discover women and gender diverse folks in technology, engineering, mathematics, and medicine. To date, there are over 15,000 people representing over 140 countries on Gauge, and nearly 2,500 people sign up every year. Wikiathons are a way for members to increase representation in STEM fields by improving and creating pages for women and underrepresented minorities. The 500 Women Scientists Wiki campaign has generated over 871,000 words, 6,500 references, and 355 articles. These have generated over 84 million views. Here's just a breakdown of the number of pages that have been edited through the 500 Women Scientists Wiki campaign. The total number of pages here represents 526, so this is the number of pages that we've edited and created. As you can see, most of the pages are for the English version of Wikipedia. In 4 years, this campaign has increased the number of biographies of women from 17.7 to 19.2%. This is slow progress, but it's progress nonetheless. Fellowship for the Future is a program for women of color by women of color to mentor and support women in STEM. There have been 2 cohorts of scientists in the Fellowship of the Future program, 4 people in 2020 and 5 in 2021. Just an example of what some of those projects are. Rose Bear Don't Walk's project is called Recovering Our Roots, and it's centered on working with the Salish people to revitalize and reintegrate traditional food plant knowledge in the hopes of improving tribal health and cultural longevity. Jessica Chan's project is called Mapping the Extent of the Tar Creek Superfund Site, and it aims to hold the EPA Region 6 office, local politicians, and state-level agencies accountable and spur greater remediation efforts. Holding institutions accountable is the organization's second goal. So in order to accomplish this goal, the projects focus on educating members and the public about policy issues that intersect between science and social justice, such as the impacts of motherhood on scientific careers and reproductive justice. Since the beginning of this organization, there has always been an emphasis on solutions-based workshops and training opportunities, most notably writing opinion pieces and how to engage with your representatives to discuss important policies. To date, pods and leadership board members have written over 25 articles and op-eds published in journals like Scientific American and Nature, and we have had over 40 interviews and mentions in national and international outlets. I actually don't have a metric for how many times we've been to public offices, but I will say we have lobbied together to visit the National Mall in Washington, D.C. A lot of us have visited our state representative. We went to Harrisburg, and of course we've visited our regional and local offices. To build collective power, pods began. So pods are local chapters of 500 Women Scientists. The term pod refers to whale pods, which signify the power of effective teamwork and collaboration. In the beginning, when everything was volunteer hours, we used a Google Drive to organize and communicate with all of the pods. We finally were able to secure some grant money, and it changed the way pods were managed, and thus Orca was created and launched in 2020. To date, there are over 500 pods from 93 countries with over 12,000 registered members on this Orca platform. And I would just argue that not everyone who is in a pod is on this platform. That number is probably at least 5 times as big as that regarding the number of members. For many events in the early years of 500 Women Scientists, so I'm thinking like 2017, 2018, 2019, pod activities were designed and implemented by the leadership team. So as you can see in the graph here, there's a correlation between pod activities and a national campaign. So like March and April 2017 occurred during the March for Science. March and April of 2018 coincided with our Science Salons for Puerto Rico campaign. And in September 2018, pods held screenings of the documentary My Love Affair with the Brain, and where we actually got to interview Geometry. So here's a summary of the programs with the largest impact, but I just want to say additionally, we have an inclusive scientific meeting guide, and the web data there shows that there are 5,300 unique visitors. Our resources page, which has resources on like how to contact your representative, how to write an op-ed, that's have 3,500 unique users, and members or the organization itself have received 4 different awards over the past, since 2017. All right, so now let's hear more about our local chapters here in Pennsylvania.
Sorry. Okay. So the Philly Pod's vision statement is, we stand together to promote STEM education, to support each other in all aspects of our careers, and to advocate for a fact-based public dialogue. And we accomplished this and more during the 4 years that we were active. The Philly Pod promoted science education in their communities by participating in both large and small local events. So tabling has been one of the Philly Pod's most common means of outreach. By tabling, we mean our pod prepares some science activities that are good for people of all ages, and then we get local women scientists to actually do the activity with people. So we've participated in the Franklin Institute's Philly Science Festival every year that it was held between 2017 and 2021. So obviously it was not held during the pandemic. This festival it was a 9-day community-wide celebration of science, and it took place annually in April. And there were lectures, debates, hands-on activities, special exhibitions, and a variety of other informal science education experiences for all ages. The point of the festival was to provide opportunities for all Philadelphians to positively engage with and build a community around science, engineering, and technology. So we were always there, as we always had a table at that. We also had a table at the John Hines Fall Nature Festival and the Pyramid STEM Showcase before the pandemic. Clearly, most of this stuff is before the pandemic. The Franklin Institute's Science After Hours program gave us an opportunity not only to table, but I personally got to give a talk, and I sat on a panel to discuss my career path at the time, from astrophysicist to outpatient surgery magazine editor in 2018. So that was just a great opportunity. Our pod participated in several of the national campaigns that Tanya just mentioned. We held a science salon for Puerto Rico, and we raised over $200 for Ciencia PR. We held a Wikipedia-thon at the Science History Institute, where we created pages for Dr. Ann Rhodes, who is a botanist who worked at the Morris Arboretum here in Philly for over 30 years, Dr. Winifred Hallwachs, a tropical ecologist whose work in Costa Rica is considered an exemplar of inclusive conservation, and Lisa Marie Stevens, who managed both the giant panda and primate programs at the Smithsonian Institute's National Zoo. So very important women who had no Wikipedia page about them. We held a screening of My Love Affair with the Brain, The Life and Science of Marion Diamond, who is a founder of modern neuroscience. And the panel afterwards that we held featured 2 local scientists from Westchester and the Franklin Institute. So advocating for a fact-based public dialogue has also been a very strong component of the pod's vision. We have met with multiple state and federal representatives or their legislative assistants, including Senator Bob Casey in his Philadelphia office, Senator Pat Toomey, he talked to us in the Philadelphia office.
His people talked to us.
His people, he did. His people talked to us, Representative Brian Fitzpatrick in the Newtown office, Congresswoman Chrissy Houlihan in her Westchester office, and 7 state representatives during a lobby day in Harrisburg. Our pod also convened a policy workshop with other pods from New York, Pennsylvania, DC, and Maryland to develop one-pagers on climate change, education, and harassment to share with our local and state policymakers. And if you're not clear what a one-pager is, it is a 2-sided document that basically shares some background information on a legislative topic, along with either current bills that our pod would want our representative to support, or it can also include proposals for bills that we would like our representative to bring forward. We used these one-pagers when State Senator Katie Muth invited us to lobby in Harrisburg back in 2019, again, before the pandemic. The one-pagers, we actually expanded them in our pod and wrote 3 more, one on parental leave, one on nuclear power, and one on transportation. We've also partnered with other local organizations in southeastern Pennsylvania, such as Penn Environment and 350.org, and many others, to provide testimony at public hearings concerning Pennsylvania K-12 education standards, transitioning the Philadelphia Energy Solutions refinery into a site not dependent on fossil fuels, urging SEPTA to find a sustainable energy source for transit with the Nicetown natural gas plant, urging the city to transition the Philadelphia Gas Works towards sustainable energy, and we also contributed to Philadelphia's climate goals. We've written letters to the editors of local papers, and we've created a Medium blog page to share all of our policy one-pagers and write about other policy issues. Also, some pod members met monthly with other leaders of women's organizations, which was convened by Representative Christy Houlihan, and our members have also been asked by local legislators for input on bills and proposals that they thought our opinion was needed on. And finally, probably the most important thing, which I think everybody else here has touched on, is that our pod members support each other in all aspects of our careers by creating mentoring groups by location and topics. So, for example, in Chester County, which is where I live, we had a group of 4 women who met monthly over 2 years to discuss career and family topics. All of us were making career changes while also starting families, so we discussed everything. Our listserv is still maintained and still active today, and many of our members have made significant career changes and through the networking done in our pod. If any member needs a scientist, pod members have shown up for each other. For example, I oversee the Girls in Science and Technology program at the American Helicopter Museum, and there was one year where every speaker we had come in was from our pod. Also, in 2018, almost every speaker at the Science History Institute Speaker Series was from our pod as well. And we've created and maintained friendships to this day. I know that I continue to benefit from this community, not only personally, but professionally. I developed relationships with my representatives, as well as other local activists. I found a community of women that supported each other, not just in our careers, but in our family experiences as well. Answering questions not just about, say, applying for positions or interviewing, but also sleep training our babies and feeding support. This community has supported me in so many ways. We are always there for each other to fall back on at any time for any situation. But with the uncertainty surrounding the status of the national organization, we are sort of at a standstill right now. So we'd love to connect with any other nonprofit organizations that may have rebranded or reorganized to learn about different strategies.
So now the Philly Pod has not only done a lot to make Philly female scientists feel empowered, but they've given way for local chapters to thrive. The Phoenixville Pod is just that. So when I was younger, I used to live near Flint, Michigan. My friends used to live in Flint, and their families were greatly affected by its water crisis. I saw how a community was not made aware of the changes that were happening, and specifically the effects on their health. So later on, when I read a great book by Mona Hanna-Attisha on the Flint water crisis in 2019, I felt inspired to create an active scientific community to foster a platform that would address environmental issues, spotlight innovative solutions, and emphasize the importance of community involvement in environmental protection. So with a lot of support from Tanya and the Philly Pod, I started the 500 Women Scientists Phoenixville Pod. My goals were to do 3 things: amplify resilient voices in environmental sciences, provide education in STEM-related subjects, and foster global connections to promote interdisciplinary approach towards solving environmental issues. So actually using the 500 Women Scientists Gauge program, I connected with various female scientists, such as Dr. Laura Gortine, to simply interview them and learn what it meant to be a female scientist, specifically in environmental sciences. Now, I was inspired by their stories, and thus the podcast, Women in Environmental Science and Engineering, began in order to share and communicate current science in an inspiring and an interactive way with the public. The impact has been outstanding, with over 12,000 listeners from over 110 countries. Now, with the joint venture with For a Green Environment, which is my nonprofit to provide STEM education, we've been supporting underrepresented students and their education during COVID-19 with coding and math classes, to supporting Boys and Girls Centers in North Penn and New York, to supporting extremely motivated students interested in STEM in Jamaica. Now, third, because I saw myself combining my passions of mine, for example, hiking and cooking to make foraging, I wanted to foster an interdisciplinary approach to exploring environmental issues. So as a subset of the podcast, I wrote a book detailing various aspects of environmental science, specifically the journey from qualitative studies in communities to seeing an environmental problem, to conducting scientific research, be it in a lab or a field, to engineering a solution and then using public policy and community outreach to actually implement that solution. We took these ideas to the United States Earth Science Organization, where some of the people I interviewed for the podcast and I collaborated. Our goal was not to influence students to study environmental or earth science, but to show how they can utilize their interests in anything ranging from computer science to business to benefit the environment and solve our global challenges. Now, after a qualitative study of the students, it was determined that they could fully articulate how their current areas of interests could be related to environmental studies. Now, the future is always uncertain, but for nonprofit organizations, there's one major predictor, that's funding. At this time, there are no large grant awards or foundational support for 500 women scientists. The organization can keep the lights on for a little while, but the future isn't looking as productive as it has been. Foundations and philanthropy no longer want to support operations. They want a shiny new thing. The inability of philanthropic organizations to recognize operational needs of nonprofits is pushing our nonprofits to extinction. Without funding to support full-time staff, operations become volunteer-based. And if anyone here has volunteered at a nonprofit, you understand this image and feel the burnout deep in your bones. This work is essential for all of us to feel included, acknowledged, and valued in our community. But I also wonder why this work requires us to scream just to be heard. Thank you so much for the opportunity to present, and thank you for listening.
Thank you so much. I can say that it's been an honor and delight to be involved with your activities, and I look forward to our conversation to see how we can support the strength of our local community or local pods.